And this gets me to a thing called sophistry. Sophistry. So we have sophistry rampant today. So let me use Chat GPT here. I'll give you its definition because it's bang on. It's right. But I just thought I'd save some time. So let me back up here. The sophists were actually ancient Greek, you could call them philosophers, but what they were really known for, what they became famous for, is that they were experts in rhetoric. And rhetoric is the art of persuasion. It can be persuasion written or persuasion spoken. In those days, it was mostly spoken, but that's what rhetoric is. Rhetoric is actually a good thing if you can master it, as long as you use it properly and don't use it for manipulation. I don't have rhetoric. I've never taken a course, but I have a friend who has a PhD in rhetoric from the University of Waterloo. And I wish I had her command of the English language, and I don't. I feel like a bit of a rube in comparison. But so the sophists in ancient Greek were famous for being experts in rhetoric and persuading people about all sorts of different things. And as a result, a term called sophistry began to emerge, and it's very much alive today. So let me read you ChatGPT's definition here. And I quote, "It refers to the use of fallacious reasoning and manipulation of language to deceive or mislead others. It is a problem that has existed for centuries and continues to be relevant today in various forms. People may be misled into making decisions based on false or distorted information, leading to negative outcomes for individuals, community, and society as a whole." That's ChatGPT's definition of sophistry, and by and large, it's bang on. In fact, I would add to that even though this originated, it's being attributed to some ancient Greek philosophers called the sophists, who are experts in rhetoric. It's the biggest problem in history right now. And how would I put this? It's a far bigger problem right now than ever before in human history, simply because of social media and how we can have something spread around the globe in seconds. And so this is a huge problem. It's called sophistry. And much of what sometimes when I'm listening to an expert, I'll say, man, this is sophistry right here. You see, there was I forget the guy's name. He's famous for saying, if you're going to be stupid, you got to be tough. Name escapes me at the moment. But if you want to understand why, you just type fail into a YouTube search, and you'll get a lot of videos on why you have to be tough if you're going to do stupid things. But there's a related or a corollary here is if you're going to be wrong, you need to be brilliant, because it takes brilliance to make something that's totally false and wrong and sell it to the people. And the more brilliant you are, in other words, the more of an expert you are, the more technical language you can use, and smoke and mirrors and manipulation of language to make the people sound, wow, this is really highly, like, this expert over here really knows his stuff. I didn't understand a word he says, but man, I'm sold on this. But what you actually heard was sophistry. And here's how you can recognize sophistry, is that after you've listened to the speech and drawn the conclusion, you then go back and say, now let me think about this. What were the premises that led to that conclusion? And in sophistry, you'll find out that there's at least one missing premise. Sometimes there's no premises at all. Rather, it was a lot of emotional chain jerking. Sometimes there are premises that lead to the conclusion, that logically lead to it, but at least one of the premises is really bad. It's terrible. It's faulty. And so, for example, here's an example of a faulty premise. Let's say you want people to arrive at this conclusion, but it really depends on the meaning of a word. But that word actually means a lot of things that don't really help you out very much if you want the people to believe such and such. So what you do is you narrow the meaning of the word down to something really narrow, technical, and precise. And you can even get technical in that it sounds impressive because you used a technical word, like to make it like the technical word here, or the Greek word here, or whatever. But when you actually look up the meaning of the word, it's actually like a bell curve, and it has a range of nuances, but they've cherry-picked only the one that suits their argument. So that's an example of a premise that might lead you to a logical conclusion, but the premise itself is faulty. It's called, in technical terms, the unwarranted restriction of the semantic field. Basically, you've taken the meaning of a word and collapsed it down to a very narrow meaning, which you needed in order to sell your argument to somebody. So that's one of the red flags in sophistry, is that when you go backwards afterwards and you say, now what if I'm going to summarize his argument, you'll find that, oh man, it is sketchy, it is shaky. There's no argument at all, or it's based on faulty premises.
I think part of the problem is nobody does that, though.
It is a problem.
Like,
and
I hear this and I automatically believe it because it backs up my priors.
Exactly.
And next thing you know, I'm going to vote for him.
You see, if you don't know what a true definition of true beliefs are, you are totally lost. It's like saying, well, I sure want to wind up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I want to wind up in London, England. But London only exists in your imagination. You think the real world is too limiting. So you have something in your imagination. You're going to be so lost so fast because you have no reality to actually help you get to the real place. You'll arrive at some place in your head and you'll be badly deceived. So our society today, in pursuing my truth, is disconnecting itself from the reality that's actually out there. But to do that, you have to abandon rational thinking. And the abandonment of rational thinking was something that was predicted by J.D. Unwin in his book, Sex and Culture. When a culture crosses a tipping point in their sexual freedom, three things happened, and abandoning of rational thinking was one of them. Abandoning lifetime monogamous relationships with one another and banning belief in God was the third. But I'm focusing on rational thinking here, and that is a major problem today. So there's no way a person who listens to sophistry, if it's what they want to hear, they simply accept it. And typically what happens in social media for a lot of people is they cancel people they strongly disagree with. And so what's left in their social media circle are only the people that fall into a certain range of agreement with their beliefs, and you get what's called an echo chamber. So they're all saying things that each other believe in. And this is another key thing on human psychology, is if a human being hears something often enough, they will tend to believe what they've heard, even though they have zero data to back it up. They just heard it repeated over and over again. And this was used during the communist era in the Soviet Union, for example, because I used to read every actual account I could get about prisons and people who had been in prison and been in indoctrination, is that simply things were repeated over and over. They were re-educated, so to speak, to the point where they just give up and they accept it. Mentally, they accept what they heard. But if it's something you already want to believe, then you're already predisposed to accept that. So you're lost. If you have this my truth idea, you are totally lost when it comes to recognizing sophistry. You are just going to be a victim. You're going to fall for it every time. And the only criteria you're going to use to reject a sophist argument is if you don't like its conclusion. But there's a lot of things in this world we don't like. Like when I go wilderness canoeing out there in the wilderness, there's certain things out there that will kill you. And I don't like the fact that they might kill me. But if I just ignore them, if I just pretend they don't exist, I've greatly increased my chance of becoming a victim at the hands of whatever it is out there in the wilderness that can kill me. And it's the same here in real life on a day-to-day interaction, is that when you embrace my truth, you then detach yourself from reality out there, and you have just signed yourself up to be a victim of sophistry every time it confirms what you want to believe. But even worse, you've signed yourself up to an eventual collision with reality down the road somewhere, where your particular internal subjective truth, my truth, will collide with reality, and then suddenly you got a problem. And it may be a problem, but by then is life-changing.